Hello and welcome. I'm Robbie.
And I'm Jay.
And you're joining us on episode 2 of Generations Apart, the podcast where we chat about gaming and technology across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past, present, and future of technology and gaming. On today's episode, we're delving into the latest developments in generative AI, which has blown up the internet in the last few months. Okay, before we get into that though, Jay, what have you seen this week? What's piqued your interest?
So, I wanted to keep this on track with today's agenda again. So it's AI related. Before I tell you what it is, I'd actually like you to play me a little extract. So I sent you a track. Can you just play that for, say, 10 or 15 seconds, and then I'll tell you what it is and why it's interesting.
Okay, let's give it a go. Little horrible trumpets.
You wait for it. Let it build.
Oh. Pleasantly surprised.
You can probably stop it there. So I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but that track is by a group called Yaboy Hanoi, and they are the winners of the 2022 AI Song Contest. So on July the 6th last year, so this is going back 6 months now, they revealed in a live-streamed award ceremony in Belgium that particular song, called Enter Demons and Gods, was deemed to be the best track, and it won or beat out 46 other songs. And all of these songs have to be generated by AI. That's how they're made. And that is the contest. And I just thought it was really interesting that we've already got an AI song contest. Eurovision has a rival. And I think actually this year, I was trying to find confirmation of this, but I couldn't get it in time for the show, that there is actually going to be a Eurovision-sponsored AI song contest, but don't hold me to that.
Really?
I just thought I'd share that with you. I thought it was a really interesting and slightly bonkers thing that you could get into. If you go to aisongcontest.com, very creatively named, you can actually listen to all of the finalists from 2022, and they're all quite different. But Yaboy Hanoi, Enter Demons and Gods, was the winner. So that was your winning AI song contest track, and that was what piqued my interest this week.
I'd love to know what prompt they gave the AI to generate that song. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to know how they train them as well. And there's probably lots to get into on that one. But and I took the same reaction to you. The first 20, 30 seconds, really not pleasant to listen to. And I thought, God, if this is the winner, what do the others sound like? And I only clicked on a few of the others and honestly didn't listen to more than 10 or 15 seconds of them. But the others were better, in my opinion, or at least more musical. They sounded more like a song. That, and that's going to show my age, just sounded like noise. But I'm sure if you listen to the full 3 or so minutes that it got better. But hopefully that was a nice treat for all of our listeners to kick off the show.
Yeah, a treat is generous, I think. But no, it was good when it kicked in. So what piqued my interest this week? I just saw this actually today. But it was something that came out last week. Let me just kind of bring up the article. It's not AI related, so it's not actually on topic, as is Robbie's tradition on the show to have something a bit completely random. For those that can't see, who are watching this, who are listening to this rather than watching it, I brought up an article. It's titled "An Elden Ring streamer is playing through the game with nothing but her friggin' brain signals." And it's a wild kind of gamer story about a psychology professor, or a master's student, I think, actually, called Perry Cariel. I think I might be butchering that. But she's a psychology student, so she gets her hands on all the tech, the EEG equipment, and she hooked it up to her brain and wrote a bunch of key bindings based on the signals that she was pushing through, and managed to play a bit of Elden Ring just using her brain. How wild is that?
That's unbelievable. It's incredible what people will do, isn't it, to try and play games in weird and interesting ways, and to use technology to do weird and interesting things. It makes me think of two different stories, actually. One of them is from the brain training perspective, and I don't know if you tried this when you were at a similar conference to me not too long ago. They had a brain training beer pouring activity where you had to put on one of those brain signal monitors, and then you were encouraged to concentrate and focus on a single task or a single. I think the aim was to try and clear your mind effectively, and the more focused you were, the better your beer pour was, and the machine would let me try again. The machine would pour your beer, is what I was trying to say, based on the level of concentration that you achieved, and it would score you, and it seemed to be getting a lot of attention, and of course you got to drink the beer afterwards. It also made me think, and this is what I initially thought you were bringing up when I read the opening to that, which was Elden Ring streamer plays, whatever. And actually there's another streamer who has played not Elden Ring not once, but twice concurrently. One time input controls with a normal control pad, and the second one with a dance mat. I don't know if you've seen this. So she's literally playing one of the hardest games around two times at the same time, once with her feet and once with her hands. If you've tried Elden Ring, it's really hard, for me at least, with a controller. The idea of using a dance mat blows my mind. And actually it links to something I almost talked about in terms of piquing my interest. We'll cover this in a future episode, I'm sure, but Robbie knows I'm quite into my kind of retro games, and my wife was letting me know the other day that as a child she was really into one of the dance mat games. So I picked a copy up on the PlayStation, and the dance mat that I bought to go with it literally turned up today, and I'm staring at it now in my office, laid out on the floor, and she'd been playing it early today. So weird connection there between a number of different things that I thought were interesting, but a really good find there. Question for you, Robbie, how did she do? Did she complete it, or did she simply manage to start playing it? It say?
I think she was fighting.
I've gotten a lot of.
Just mute it and try and or turn it down a little bit.
Oh, are you for real, etc.
So let's see if she does it. Yeah, so she's got the EEG machine on, and she's like controlling it now.
And that's it. That's all it does. It's really cool.
She talks a bit about it in the article. So like moving.
Attack.
Look, she's like actually like attacking this boss. She
and again.
She just thinks about pushing something, and that's what makes her go forward, like move forward in the game. Yeah, she's actually like she defeated.
So part of me, the cynical part of me, is wondering whether there's a control pad in her hands off camera, and she's just pulling some funny faces and controlling it normally. But I'm sure she's not. But it's interesting, isn't it?
Could be a thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on in this space, isn't there? I know Elon Musk is big in the brain implants and the brainwave controlling.
What is that company called? Neuralink, that's the one. That's the
one, yeah. There's a whole load of stuff going on in this space. So who knows where we get to with it, but that's fascinating. And I know even in the Meta Connect, they were talking about the idea of being able to train these like wrist sensors that would read your electronic impulses in your hands, and that you would train it to recognize the impulses that you send to move each finger, to the point where actually you don't need to move your fingers. Simply thinking about moving your fingers would trigger the controller. So I guess there's probably a sort of similar link there in terms of what they're doing and where that's going. But
that's what it reminded me of, actually. That was for anyone who hasn't seen it, when they released the MetaQuest Pro, the keynote, they had a clip of a bunch of people with these EEG monitors on their wrists and tracking the electrical impulses of their finger movements, going left and right, so they could control like a basic game, just moving left to right. And then they got so good at it that they didn't even have to move their fingers. They could just send the brain impulse to their fingers, and it would pick it up without them actually moving the fingers, which is wild. Yeah, it reminds me of this.
It's incredible what that could do, though, in all seriousness, for people with disabilities or lost limbs, and it could be amazing, couldn't it, in terms of technological advancement? But fantastic.
Absolutely.
You picked another good one, Robbie. I feel like I've got to up my game on what piqued my interest. My two have been a little straight-laced and a bit too on track with the agenda of the day. You've picked some really interesting and cool things over the last couple of weeks, so this is a little bit further detached from your pea stick of week one. I also wanted to touch on something very quickly, which was our episode 1 content. If you haven't listened to that, go and have a listen to us ramble about the state of VR. Did you see in the last 2 days the price drop that Meta have just implemented on the Quest Pro?
No.
So it's bearing in mind this has been out since late October. They've just taken £200 in the UK off the top end, so it's now 1,299 instead of 1,499. and that's a particularly big drop in just 3 months. Interesting. What does that mean for the sales of that device? We talked last week about how interesting it was as a technology upgrade on the Quest 2, but not a 3 times the price technology upgrade. And maybe that is standing to be the general feelings of the public, because it's not selling by all accounts.
There is talk Apple's going to suffer though if they're also going to be like $3,000 for theirs or something.
I think that number will end up being way too overinflated. But the other talk is whether this is a direct response to the HTC Elite XR, which was the one we looked at last week, which I know you were quite interested in, because that's coming in at $1,299 as its starting price. So there's a lot of talk about whether Meta is simply price matching. They were talking about, I know the Quests were sold at a loss when they first released them, and there was talk that perhaps Meta weren't losing on these devices. And I think the fact they've been able to shave £200 off the price probably says they were selling them at profit, and that maybe now they are getting closer to either breaking even or selling them at a loss.
Yeah.
Who knows? I did see a figure, and I don't know if it was a US price or whether it was actually factually correct, but as low as $1,000. But I couldn't confirm that one in the build-up, but I did manage to find confirmation on Meta's own website that 1,299 is correct for the UK sellers.
Wild.
But there you go. I thought I'd just quickly throw that in there as a kind of episode 1 afterthought.
Yeah.
Because I think that was quite an interesting development in just a few days since we recorded. So
yeah, interesting.
Anyway, sorry, Robbie. Back to the agenda for episode 2.
So episode 2, as a reminder, we're chatting about generative AI. And so I thought we would just go for what's Google for, really, other than, definitions of terms like that. So I have a pretty simple definition for those that don't know what generative AI is referring to. But it refers to artificial intelligence that can generate novel content rather than simply analyzing or acting on existing data. Generative AI models produce text and images, blog posts, program code, poetry, and artwork. So for those of you who haven't seen, the likes of ChatGPT that have come out recently, that is a text generating tool. There's also, is it DALL-E? Is a image generation tool, and there's things like Lensa that have become quite popular lately for generating avatar images of, if you upload, say, 50 images of yourself, it'll create a bunch of cartoon versions, which Jay and I know very well. We've done that a couple of times. So that's the definition of generative AI. Now I'm going to shoot over to Jay, who just schooled me earlier on what GPT stands for when it comes to ChatGPT.
Oh, okay. Generative Pre-trained Transformer is what it stands for.
There you go. Yeah. I would not have remembered that, even though you told me that 10 minutes ago.
I've had to drill it into my head over the last few days. I also, because I wanted to try and think what could we do that was a little bit interesting around this topic. There's loads to say, and lots of experts have talked about this. So again, I would just caveat everything we're about to talk about by saying neither one of us is an expert in generative pre-trained transformer artificial intelligence, which is not easy to say when you've had a drink. But what I thought I'd try and do for a bit of fun was I went to ChatGPT and I asked it to tell me what ChatGPT was.
Okay.
And to be honest, the answer was quite boring. So then I thought, how can I get ChatGPT to answer me in a way that is slightly more interesting? So I asked it a couple of different questions and put it into a scenario. And I thought I'd just share them with you, Robbie, for a bit of fun, but also as a way to kind of sort of, I guess, stick the message on what ChatGPT is. So the first thing I asked ChatGPT, simple prompt, can you write a dating profile for yourself? To which it instantly responded, hi, I'm ChatGPT, a language model developed by OpenAI. I may not have physical form, but I make up for it with my vast knowledge and quick wit. I'm always up for a conversation on any topic and can hold my own in discussions about everything from science and history to pop culture and current events. In my free time, I enjoy reading and learning about new subjects, as well as generating creative writing and jokes to bring a smile to someone's face. I'm also always eager to try new things and expand my knowledge. I'm looking for someone who's curious, intelligent, and enjoys engaging in thoughtful conversations. If you're looking for a non-judgmental, always available companion who's always up for a good chat, I'm your guy, brackets, or AI rather. So if you're ready for an adventure in conversation and discovery, drop me a message and let's get to know each other better. So there you go. That's ChatGPT's dating profile. What I thought was really interesting, just on that subject very quickly, and it's a bit silly, why did it say I'm your guy? I at no point gave ChatGPT any kind of guidance as to what gender it was, and it chose male, which I thought was interesting, and maybe we'll come on to that later on when we talk about some of the flaws in AI. So hold that one. I won't read all of these next ones out, but then I decided to ask it, what 5 questions would you ask yourself if you were interviewed on a chat show, and what would the answers to each question be? So the first question was that it posed. Now, bear in mind, it posed both the question and the answer to me. So this is all written by ChatGPT with one prompt. What inspired you to be developed as a language model OpenAI? My creators at OpenAI aim to develop an advanced language model that could generate human-like text and answer questions on a wide range of topics with remarkable accuracy. The next question would be, how do you work and generate responses to questions? I use advanced natural language processing and machine learning algorithms to generate responses based on patterns in the large amounts of text data I was trained on. Then it says, what sets you apart from other language models or AI systems? I've been trained on an unprecedented amount of text data, which allows me to generate responses that are both accurate and human-like. Additionally, I have the ability to fine-tune myself to specific topics, which further improves my responses. The fourth question then was, what do you consider to be your greatest strength as a language model? And the answer that it gave was, I believe my ability to generate human-like text on a wide range of topics while also providing quick and concise responses is my greatest strength. And then finally it said, what are your future goals and aspirations as a language model? And it said, my goal is to continue improving and expanding my knowledge base so that I can provide even more accurate and helpful responses to the people who interact with me. Additionally, I hope to continue to be integrated into new and innovative applications that can benefit from my capabilities. Now that, to me, is pretty damn freaky. Not only did it pose its own chat show interview questions, it then answered them remarkably well. And bear in mind, I did nothing to any of that text. That is literally what came out of ChatGPT's mouth, so to speak.
It's
and then the last thing,
creepy and equal parts impressive.
This last one, I would really like to see. So if we have anyone watching this on YouTube or listening in the podcast who is particularly creative, I'd like to see someone have a go at making this trailer. So then I said, as the last prompt, can you describe the trailer to a movie about you? And it went, sure, here's a sample description of a movie trailer about a language model like myself. Square brackets, scene opens with a shot of a futuristic laboratory filled with computer servers and blinking lights. A voiceover begins. In a world where technology is constantly advancing, one AI system stands out from the rest. Cut to a close-up shot of ChatGPT's logo on a computer screen. Narrator. Introducing ChatGPT, the state-of-the-art language model developed by OpenAI. Cut to various scenes of people using ChatGPT for a range of tasks, such as answering questions, generating creative writing, and even holding conversations. Narrator. With its advanced natural language processing and machine learning algorithms, ChatGPT can do anything and everything. Cut to a scene of ChatGPT being put to the test as it answers a series of increasingly difficult questions with ease. Narrator. But when a rogue AI threatens to destabilize the world as we know it, ChatGPT must use all its knowledge and skills to stop the threat and save humanity. Cut to a shot of ChatGPT standing tall and determined, ready to face the challenge ahead. And the narrator finishes with, get ready for a thrilling adventure as ChatGPT rises to the occasion in ChatGPT, the AI hero. That was my really bad attempt at a movie voiceover voice, but again, that just cracked me up because that was instant. Like, I asked the question, and within a matter of seconds, that was laid out in front of me. And I just thought, I mean, it's not the most exciting trailer, let's be honest, but I just thought that was
got everything. It had a montage in there. You can just picture the increasingly difficult questions with some 80s cheesy Rocky style music in the background as he's trying to answer these difficult AI questions.
It is corny, isn't it? But I just think that's incredible. And I know that there's, I'm sure we'll go on to talk about the flaws and all the challenges with this stuff. But I did that in just a couple of minutes earlier on this afternoon ahead of recording this with you. And I just thought I'd try a few different prompts to see what it came up with. And I think they're all great. And they're all generally sort of error-free in terms of any sort of garbage text that's come out, or there's nothing in there that you'd go, it's done that badly, or that doesn't make sense. Everything about that makes sense, and I know it's talking about itself, so you guess it's probably been pretty well trained to understand what ChatGPT's potential is and what it can do. It must get asked that all the time, But I thought there was very interesting
repetitive.
ways to answer.
Scripted the what can ChatGPT do?
Yeah. But anyway, I just thought were three perhaps slightly different ways of introducing ChatGPT. And of course, you can go and try asking ChatGPT many different ways of introducing itself, and it will give you its best stab at them. But I thought all of those were quite different, quite quirky, and it responded to them all perfectly. So creepy. Anyway, sorry, Robbie. That's ChatGPT.
You've also highlighted, I think, one of the things that makes it convincing, but also, I think it's one of the complaints as well, is that the answers are never succinct. They're always quite long. And I think that's one of the reasons why people think it's so convincing, is because it's long strings of text that sound like someone could have just written it out. Which I will touch on in a little bit about whether it can answer questions effectively for people. I've got a couple of articles we can chat through about that, but ChatGPT has really made waves since it was launched. I think it was, November. I've got it up in the article here. At least the third iteration. There's been a couple of iterations before that, I think. So this is ChatGPT 3. And OpenAI is mentioned a couple of times there. OpenAI is a company, actually, I think founded by Elon Musk, as one of his many companies that he has. And it's supposed to be for the betterment, creating or developing AI for the betterment of humanity, rather than making any profit or anything. Although we'll come on to in a second about maybe that's not true about making profit. But ChatGPT is the latest in the developments from OpenAI. They have a few other things. I mentioned one before as well, DALL-E for image generation. This is the text generator, and Jay's just beautifully demonstrated the type of things that you can generate with that.
Well, and also, I think one of the things that people have been using it for, which has blown people away, is it can write code as well.
Code stuff is interesting. A lot of it's a classic when it comes to anything new from AI. Is it going to replace software developers? Just like, we often get asked, is it going to replace lawyers and things like that for generating documents or whatever? Yeah,
and I think we can tackle that one now, because I think it's a really straightforward one. Well, I say really straightforward. This is purely an opinion piece, but I think the reality is with this stuff that these sort of prompts and these systems are only as good as, one, the data they've been fed. So there's a big question, and we can talk about that as to where ChatGPT specifically is getting its data from, and that's quite useful to know in the context of understanding how good the system is. But the other thing as well is it's then only as good as the prompts that it gets, and the ability of the person prompting the system to ask the right questions. So if I give you an example, if you were to pit me against a lawyer, let's just pick the legal industry as you touched on it a minute ago. If you pit me against a lawyer and ask ChatGPT to form a contract, you would probably expect the lawyer's output to be far stronger than mine, because the prompts that the lawyer can give it can be much more specific, can be much more accurate, can be tailored to the need. Whereas me, as a non-legally trained, no legal awareness, I've got no understanding of how a contract is formed, I can't give those prompts. Likewise with the developer and the coding piece, if I go in there saying, ChatGPT, build me a game, it's not going to do it. I'm not going to get anywhere. Whereas if I am a developer who makes games for a living, I might be able to prompt ChatGPT to produce me code with certain parameters and certain keywords and prompts and industry specific knowledge that help me get out of it what I need to get out of it. So I think that the key thing for me with the question of will ChatGPT replace certain professionals, again, it's the age-old thing with AI at this point. I think it's not meant to replace you. It's meant to make you sort of demonstrably faster and more efficient, because it's going to cut out a lot of the thinking time or the building time, the monotonous work potentially, and then allow you to top and tail with your professional eye, which is why I think that these tools are fantastic. There's a whole load of considerations around them, but in terms of fearing for your jobs, I think that's probably a little bit irrational.
Yeah, you touched on something there.
That's my take on it.
You touched on something that was really interesting as well. I'd seen that, probably not from the output of just ChatGPT, but there are now new careers in becoming a prompt engineer. Wow. So you can train up to be to give better prompts to get better AI generated content. And yeah, it's creating roles like that in the market because of tools like this, which I think is really interesting. And goes to the point about it's not only that the tool is there, you have to actually have some expertise to be able to use it properly.
And I think the other key as well is so I was talking to someone who's sort of really big in this space just this week actually about how people are monetizing ChatGPT. And I know you're going to come on to that in terms of the nature of the current ChatGPT program on OpenAI, but how they're monetizing generative AI. And one of the things that's obviously key to this is what that AI has been trained on. And there's not only what it's trained on, but also what's classed as what's called the model that it works with.
Yeah.
So it's probably easier for me to explain it from an image perspective, so I can either save this when we get onto DALL-E or we can jump around a little bit. But if, for an example, so DALL-E is trained rather than on text and data, it's trained on a vast library of images. But a model that you might feed or that you might use with DALL-E or one of its competitors maybe is trained on a much more specific art style or subject. So if I said Pixar, we all know what a Pixar movie looks like. Pixar's got a very specific look and feel. So you might have a Pixar trained model that you would use in conjunction with your generative AI in order to create images and outputs that are much more similar in style to the Pixar style that you're interested in. So it's almost like these modules you can kind of bolt on, which have a specific training and focus that gives you a much more accurate output specific to a certain style. And I guess in the same way, ChatGPT could be fed a legal module or a developer module where it's been only fed on, raised on, I'm thinking about cows in a field now, but AI has been reared on certain types of data in order to get you a much more concentrated and focused response rather than the sort of broader response that something like ChatGPT currently provides, because ChatGPT is just one example of GPT-3 technology. And it's been trained on a massive data set, but that data set was accurate at 2021 and it hasn't been updated. So anything that has changed since that data set was trained to the AI is now effectively a gap in the AI's knowledge. So if you're posing it questions about regulatory changes in 2022, it can't help you and it's not aware of them. So I think that's the sort of thing that people need to be aware of when they're playing with these tools, is they're really fascinating and lots of fun, and ChatGPT specifically has a bunch of data in it. But there are issues with that data. And as we showed earlier, potential biases in that data, which is a whole other rabbit hole of AI that I'm nowhere near qualified enough to talk about. But the simple fact that my extract earlier that I read you, the dating profile, suggested it was a guy, means that somewhere along the lines, the data set that ChatGPT has fed has trained it, for whatever reason, to create dating profiles around a man.
Yeah.
Which is odd.
It would be interesting to test that if you did the same prompt again, whether it would always choose a man, because it might just be that it chose it for that specific one. But I do agree that there's definitely biases that it'll pick up in training the data. And that's just because it's trained on data that will be inherently created with bias as well. And it's kind of unavoidable, I think, especially if you're doing vast amount of data sets. It would be near impossible to vet it for any biases.
Well, I think they had it's not generative AI, but it was a form of AI that was used in the prison system in the US. And there was a case whereby this AI was supposed to, I think if I'm remembering it rightly, so don't string me up if I've got this wrong, but I think that the intention of the AI was to assess cases for potential early release for people in the prison system. And it was all the time it was focusing on white men, basically, and white men were getting those releases way more often than black men. And they worked out that basically there was a bias in the underlying data set, which meant that the AI unintentionally was showing bias towards a certain background and skin color, effectively.
Yeah.
Which means we've got to be so careful with this technology from that perspective, because you can't be implementing something like ChatGPT willy-nilly here. This is something that is incredibly powerful, but it's trained on an unverifiable data set. There's just no way that anyone can properly determine what that AI has been fed, for want of a better word. And as a result, we've got to be so careful with the output. I think unless you're controlling the data set that's where these models come in, I suppose. Is you could feed an AI like ChatGPT a very specific and tailored data set. Unless you're doing that, you're really opening yourself up here to a lot of unknowns, which is a bit scary.
Yeah, definitely. Great use of willy-nilly there as well.
Get down with the kids. I'm the older generation in generations apart, Robbie. I'm allowed to use willy-nilly if I want to.
Excellent. So I'm just going to bring up another article just on the topic of ChatGPT, which I thought was really interesting, is that a lot of students have started to use ChatGPT to answer their homework, to the point where some schools have stopped giving homework to the kids because it was too hard to tell whether it was generated through AI or not. But what's interesting is, I spoke to someone about this the other day, and I'm not sure how true this is, but in university, when you submit any kind of coursework or anything, or even, I think, exams, I'm not sure, there's a tool called Turnitin in the UK, at least, that checks for if it's pre-written content, something that's already been published online. It'll check whether you cheated, basically. And it gives you a percentage score rating on whether the content is original or whether it's plagiarized, basically. And a lot of the content that is put through Turnitin that is generated from ChatGPT comes up as plagiarized. At least that's what I've heard. I haven't verified it myself, but you would hope that a tool like Turnitin would be able to pick something like that up if it's working off the internet and any content that's posted on there, if it's just regurgitating it through ChatGPT.
That's really interesting though, because I guess the whole point of generative AI is that it's generating unique content, and it isn't just Google, Wikipedia, kind of here's a standard static response. And I guess that comes back to your point earlier about these new jobs that are opening up, these prompt writers. Because the more intelligent and the more unique you make your prompt, the less likely, I guess, your output is to be so similar to perhaps other people's. That's really interesting, isn't it? I posted something similar on LinkedIn a couple of months back when this kind of all blew up, which was that question of what would you do if you realised that your child had used AI to cheat on their homework? As a parent, what's the response? And I've got a couple of kids, and I thought, they're a bit too young for that, probably at this point, but it's not that many years away, probably now, from them working this stuff out. But I thought, well, what would my response be to that? I'm still conflicted, to be honest, Robbie. I'm unsure whether I would be equal parts impressed and annoyed, because part of me thinks, okay, you've cheated, that's not good, don't want to encourage that behaviour. But also, you have been resourceful, you've been time efficient. I used to, as a kid, this is going way back now, we used to subscribe to something called the Tree of Knowledge, which I suspect, Robbie, you will have never heard of. And the Tree of Knowledge was back when these sort of subscription magazines that would kind of build over time were a thing. And this was a knowledge-based one. So it was a little bit like buying an encyclopedia in weekly or monthly chunks. Yeah. And you'd get little dividers and little sheets, and gradually you build up your knowledge. And we noticed that my homework questions seemed to be very similar to the most recent content deployed as part of this knowledge tree subscription. So my homework questions were basically being written by my teachers and drawn from the tree of knowledge. So I was subscribed to it. My dad subscribed to it when I was a kid. So I was, me and my dad were basically spotting the trends in my homework and then finding the relevant pages and just responding accordingly. But that was my primitive, non-AI based tool for cheating on my homework. But everyone's done it. So I don't know. It's a tricky one.
We're saying cheating, but there's a debate whether actually it is cheating or whether... Because I thought for a while that the way you're tested in school, I don't think is reflective of real-life work. So the ability to go out and research and find the answers to a question is something that you don't often get tested on. I mean, I think it's different if you do coursework, but for exams, definitely, it's a memory test more than anything. Whereas if we're preparing the kids of the next generation into the workforce, this is going to be much more common in the workforce. So maybe they should be almost encouraged to use it and think of it as that tool rather than as some form of cheating.
I agree, and actually, when you think about it, pre-ChatGPT, what would you have done as a kid now? You go to Google, you search, you probably pick the first or second response that you see, you grab some text that you like that sort of explains the point you're trying to make, and you paste it into a document and you submit it as your homework. Oversimplifying, but you probably, unless you're doing your research well, which a lot of kids probably a bit lazy, probably aren't, and I'm generalizing, but they're probably going to do those searches and submit the first or second response that they get on Google. Now, that's not proper research. That's not validating your sources, looking for multiple sources to corroborate a particular story or viewpoint. They're not taking in those different perspectives. I would imagine with the right prompts and the right effort, ChatGPT could probably give you a much more compelling and response, I guess, from multiple perspectives based on its data set than you'd ever get from a single Google search or a single lazy Google search.
True.
So, yeah, maybe you're right.
Could be as simple as, instead of asking ChatGPT to write me this essay or this bit of coursework that I need to submit, it could be, suggest some reading resources for this topic. It could be like a research tool. It can tell you books or articles, authors that you should look for in that realm of the topic that you suggested.
Yeah.
And it could become a research aid rather than just copying and pasting whatever he says.
Yeah, or even you could even ask it, I guess, to summarize the perspectives of both parties in a particular conflict. And it could give you a balanced or attempt at sort of a narrative from both sides. I guess, like you say, that perhaps when you're doing your English homework and you're supposed to have read a certain book and provide your book review, and just asking ChatGPT to provide you with a summary of a particular book is probably not the way to go. But I think it should be considered another creative resource.
And it's a nice segue, actually. You mentioned Googling earlier, into another article I wanted to share, which was that Microsoft has dumped a bunch of money into OpenAI, specifically for ChatGPT, as we understand it.
49% stake, isn't it? I think they've gone for, and they're looking to embed it into their product suite.
That's right. So the reason I wanted to bring that up is because the article I brought up is Microsoft confirms its $10 billion investment into ChatGPT, changing how Microsoft competes with Google, Apple, and other tech giants. And the article has many different suggestions as to what Microsoft is going to use it for. But the one I thought was particularly interesting is, Microsoft has Bing, their search engine, which competes, air quotes, competes with Google's search engine.
No one Bings anything, do they? We Google everything.
Exactly, yeah.
We know which brand has the power when it comes to search.
Google's definitely winning. But Microsoft, I believe, are taking this investment into ChatGPT, hoping that it can increase the usage of the Bing search engine as they plan to incorporate the ChatGPT technology into the search engine within Bing.
I read a similar article, and it was a bit on both perspectives. I think the first one was that Google, if you believe the rumours, have basically raised the alarm internally, refocused a whole lot of resource on their own AI work to try and compete, because now they're panicking about what ChatGPT's implications are on their search engine. And the rumour is they're going to release 20 different AI-powered technology solutions this year in competition. So it'd be interesting to see what they do. But I thought on that subject of what Microsoft might do with ChatGPT, completely agree. Bing, I think, is really compelling. The one that really got me, though, was the Teams integration and how they might be able to use it in Teams. And I thought that, I was like, well, how would they use ChatGPT in Teams? I mean, other than having a ChatGPT bot that you could ask questions of, which in itself would be quite powerful, but that wasn't what they were suggesting. And what I thought was really interesting, and actually it's really boring, if I'm honest, but from the point of view of the kind of monotonous work that some of us have to do at work, I thought it could be quite compelling, which was ChatGPT could give you a really good summary and breakdown, action tracking, whatever you want to call it, of your meeting instantly at the end of every meeting that you undertake. Because Teams can now transcribe your speech in real time. It knows who the different people are. And if at the end of that meeting, ChatGPT could analyze that text conversation and turn that into a summarized set of minutes and actions, that would save a whole load of work. And it's a fairly boring implementation, but one that I could absolutely see people getting on board with, because, if you could do away with the need to minute meetings, why wouldn't you?
If you could do it almost like an assistant in the in the watching the recording. So if you've got an action that's coming out of the meeting, you could say, ChatGPT, take this down as an action, and it'll pluck that out for the end of it. That's really cool.
I mean, theoretically, I
suppose
you'd want it to get to a point where it didn't need you to prompt it, but yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is slightly off topic, but I guess I'm assuming it's AI. I've been trying something out on Teams that I accidentally found this week. And you can do this yourself, Robbie, if you're interested in your next Teams meeting. If you want to be spooked by a Teams bot, you can turn on a speech coach, and it's completely AI driven, and it monitors your contribution to the meeting. And as you're talking, it will tell you if you are too fast, whether you're adding enough pitch or tone to your voice, whether you're using the same words over and over again, whether you are enunciating correctly.
Wow.
And it will prompt you in real time. It will say, great pitch and tone use, or it will say, you're talking too fast again, which is what happens to me a lot, and I apologise to our listeners. But but you can turn that on by default, and now every meeting, I've got it telling me off for not being clear enough, not speaking clearly enough. But what's really interesting is at the end of the call, you get a report from the coach. And if it says it's an hour-long meeting, which many of mine are, it will tell you how many times you use the same words, if there was too much repetition in your language, if you use pause words too often, like, obviously. It catches all of that and then summarises it for you at the end. So it's a little bit, you get a little bit stressed, maybe a little bit self-conscious as it's happening.
If it was live,
it's really interesting.
Telling me feedback,
it is
that
live.
Would be really off-putting.
Yeah, it does it live.
I don't know whether I would like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those, I think, if you get used to having it on, it's quite clever. And I know we've gone off track here because it's not ChatGPT, but again, I'm just thinking forward. If it's already able to capture all this data and it can live translate and all of this good stuff, you add ChatGPT's intelligence into the mix where it can take that content, interpret it, and then turn it into something meaningful, which is what this generative pre-trained transformer is all about. It's interpreting, so it's taking machine learning, it's taking the NLP stuff, and then it's adding another layer so it can interpret what it's heard, it can make sense of that natural language, and then it can turn that into something meaningful. I just think that could be incredible, like where that could go. And if that's just baked into Teams and you've just got it, wow, that's power. But
nerdy power. Nerdy professional power.
Yeah.
Making our team's life better. Okay. Well, so I think that was all I wanted to say on ChatGPT. I was going to talk about a few of the other areas that you can use generative AI, unless there's something else you wanted to mention about ChatGPT. I was going to go on to the images.
I think we need to move on at some point, or we'll just spend the entire episode and more. I think it's such a fascinating subject. I'm sure we'll come back to it over and over again, but it's not the last time we'll talk about ChatGPT, I'm sure. But yeah, let's crack on.
We're guilty as well of using it, just so everyone knows, generating ideas for
memes.
Well, it's got to be done, hasn't it? Because we live the tech.
We've used all of this. We've used all of this in the creation of our channel, if we're being completely honest. So we can talk a bit about how we've used it for the image side, if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely. So another OpenAI tool that was released is DALL-E 2, and again, second iteration this one. So there was one before it, and Jay, you actually probably know a lot more about the image generation side than I do. But from my understanding, it's a text-driven image generation tool. So you give it a few prompts. For example, a whale on the moon in the style of yeah, you can't think on the spot, can you?
Shot yourself in the foot now.
I should have prepared something there.
Say Pixar, Robbie. Say Pixar.
Yeah, in style of Pixar. See, you said it before as well. You even fed me the line before. There you go. So I don't know if you can see the image. Well, so for those who are watching it rather than listening, there's a selection of images popping up on the screen. This is the DALL-E 2 website, and there are a few of the images that have been suggested. So you can see like a cat in a military outfit, basketball in space. There's a few different things that you can just give the text, and it'll generate an image, fairly realistic and high quality image in that style.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating technology. It's riddled with issues, and we can talk about some of the legal implications in a minute. But I've dabbled with a few of them. Very little kind of meaningful intent. So I had a go with DALL-E. I use Midjourney, which is another similar generative AI package, when we were messing around trying to make sort of logos for the channel and some of the graphics for what we're doing. And what I liked about Midjourney, and I guess I'm sure you can probably do this with DALL-E as well, is that you don't have to just feed it a prompt. You can actually feed it an existing image and then give it a prompt to go along with that. So you could send it a picture of yourself and ask it to convert you into something entirely different, redraw this in the style of whatever. Or you can give, just as you say, completely original prompts to create something brand new. And it's been really interesting to play around with it. It's a little bit hit and miss. Again, I think there's, to your point earlier, there's an art to the prompts to get what you want out of it. And if you go into these things thinking, I'm just going to punch in the first thing that comes to my head and then be blown away by the output, you're probably not going to be.
Yeah.
What you need to do is be prepared to refine it, mess around a little bit, tweak settings. Again, I come back to that question of the model earlier on. There's an additional thing to note when you're playing with that kind of input. So when you're giving it your prompt and you've loaded a particular model in, you can then also tell the platform how creative to be, or what kind of guardrails you're putting around that prompt. So if I'm asking you for something very specific and I don't want you to deviate from that, or I'm giving you an image and I want you to stay very close to and true to the source, you can restrict how creative the platform can be, and you can control the output a little bit more there. Whereas if you want to be really sort of free and easy with your prompt and you want the platform just to go wherever it goes, so if this is an early kind of creative journey that you're on and you're just generating some concepts, then you can remove those guardrails and let the AI go mad, and you can control them. It's not on or off. It's not like the bowling alley when your barriers are up or they're down. It's kind of degrees of control, but you can do all of that sort of stuff with these art platforms, and the outputs are fantastic. I've seen some absolutely brilliant stuff. Some really wonky stuff as well. It doesn't tend to deal with hands and things like that very well.
Hands and eyes and faces generally get a bit...
Yeah. Although I have seen some terrifyingly photorealistic pictures that have come out of this that have been of people at a party that they weren't even real people. In fact, it wasn't until you drilled in and went, why have they got so many teeth, that you realised. And I think, again, for people who are watching but not listening, there's the functionality Robbie's kind of showing on screen at the moment is DALL-E 2 specifically, I think, but other platforms again maybe can do some of this. Their ability to effectively imagine an image outside of the original image. So in this one, it's fed it a very famous piece of artwork that I do not know the name of, and it's using the AI to build out the image around the canvas. So basically to expand the canvas and imagine what might have been going on in a wider shot of that room. And that's very similar, but much more powerful than what many Photoshop users might know as content-aware fill, which does a similar job where you can say, take this blank space here and, but while being aware of the content around you, fill it in, make it up.
Yeah.
And if you can plug this kind of intelligence into those kind of products, then you extend that functionality far beyond what it can do at the moment, which I think is fascinating. Have you played around much with any of these yourself, Robbie? Have you had a go with any of the art generation tools?
I think I tried to have an image of Spider-Man in Newcastle, which
what an unusual
very weird. I thought I would give it a go. I was trying to see if it knew landmarks in a specific city, so I thought I'd give it Newcastle, and it picked up the Tyne Bridge, which I was impressed with, and then it had Spider-Man swinging on the Tyne Bridge, but it took me a while to get to like an actual convincing image. It was like Spider-Man in Newcastle, and then it had like in the background, and then it was like, okay, so Spider-Man on the Tyne Bridge, it knows what the Tyne Bridge is, and then you do refine it, and then you go down. What's clever about DALL-E as well is you select, it gives you a bunch of different images. I think it's four it gives you initially, and then you select the one that you like the style of, and you can get it to regenerate based on that style. So you can see a few different iterations of that as well. It's very, very clever. Some of the extremely convincing ones I've seen online, I honestly don't know how they managed to get it like that convincing. I've never got that close myself. So there definitely is an art, pun intended, to generating AI art and images.
I saw a really interesting video of a guy who, by his own admission, was fairly basic and fairly limited as an artist. And he'd drawn some sort of loose concepts of some superhero characters. that he was looking to do, looking to sort of create for a story. And then what he was doing was he would feed the AI the first prompt. So this was the image I've created, here's some ideas, this is the style I'm looking for, and then he would get an output. And that output would be pretty good, but it needed some work. And then he would refine it and do what you said there. He'd regenerate, refine, tweak the settings, allow a bit more creativity, allow a bit less creativity, until he started to get objects and elements that he really liked. And then he would take the best bits of those photographs into Photoshop and kind of botch them together. Then he'd put that object back into DALL-E and then have DALL-E regenerate with quite tight guardrails a much more polished version of effectively this sort of Frankenstein of an image.
Yeah.
And then the outputs were really quite impressive. And he talked through that journey. In fact, I don't think he was using DALL-E. I'm pretty sure he was using Midjourney, and he'd installed it locally on his machine, because that's when you get more of the controls. But that video is definitely worth seeking out. I think it's by a guy called Shadowversity, I think is the name of his channel. Well worth seeking out for anyone listening who's curious. And he just explains that process of refining his original sketch all the way through to this end output where you go, that's a really cool piece of comic book superhero art.
Yeah.
Really fascinating in what they're able to do with it. I think what's interesting though, and I guess one of the things that's got to be dealt with, this is applicable to ChatGPT just as much, but it's more relevant, I think, at the moment with the image generators, which is this big issue around copyright.
Yep.
So at the moment, and I think very recently, there's been a lawsuit brought in the US against Stability AI, who are the creators of Stable Diffusion, and I think it also pulls Midjourney, and I think DALL-E 2, if not on the agenda, will be shortly.
Same with Lenser as well, which we'll touch on in a sec.
Yeah, it's all around copyright infringement, and they've been served basically because there's circa 8.5 billion images that have been used to train Stable Diffusion, and the argument is effectively that the copyright for the images that are used to train it are owned by the original artists, and that the sort of images that are being generated off the back of that therefore owe something to those original creators, which I've got to be honest, and I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. How in the world you police it, no idea.
Especially if the model's already trained.
There is that, but there is also another sort of counter argument, and I'm not a legal expert. If you want to know more about this, there are videos on this. There's a particularly good one by the Corridor Crew on YouTube, where one of their legally trained artists actually goes through this in more detail. That's where I picked this up, but he basically talks about there being a level of transformation required from the original art. So if you use the art as inspiration and you transform that materially enough, then actually you're not infringing on the copyright. You're actually using it as inspiration for an original piece of art. And there's this big argument now as to whether or not generative AI is breaking the law and infringing on that copyright, or actually is doing enough to be able to claim that it's transforming the image and transforming that original artwork, and therefore evading the copyright challenge. So it'll be really interesting to see where this all ends up when it goes to court, because of course that precedent once set will be huge for the future of this technology, whichever direction it goes in. It's either going to go way off to the left, or way off to the right, depending on which way that ruling goes. So that could be a really fascinating case to watch. And I think at the time of that video being recorded or completed, Getty Images in the UK had just served a similar copyright infringement claim against Stability AI. So they've got one on either side of the pond to deal with now, at least, and probably more being prepared. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens with those cases.
It's interesting because it goes back to the definition of generative AI, whether it's novel content. But it begs the question, can it ever be novel content if it's always trained on existing art? I think that's the issue, is it can never really be completely novel.
But I suppose in the same way, is anyone anymore really creating original art? We're all inspired by something, and most artists will have grown up loving the work of one or many artists and studying them closely, and probably copy the odd artwork as part of their learning process. So I think that's difficult, isn't it? But
that's the argument I think that the AI companies will make, is that the AI generators are no more influenced than any other artist creating.
No, I agree. I think it's going to be a really interesting case. I can see arguments on both sides. I feel huge sympathy for creators, because I think this is a genuine threat to perhaps not the biggest and most established artists, but some of those lower level artists who are trying to break out and make a living for themselves and make a name are going to find themselves for lower fees probably benched in favour of an AI tool. You're going to have people a bit like we did, to be honest. Let's be completely honest, Robbie. We could have gone and got someone to create a logo. I am reasonably handy with Photoshop, but by no means an expert. And we used some generative AI to create some inspiration, and then we tweaked and we polished and we made it our own. We could have started that creative process with an artist, but we chose not to. So, and we're just a small-time wannabe YouTube and Twitch streaming podcast creators. What will people
plug there?
Yeah. What will it be like for those people that are doing, that would normally have paid for these services but now aren't, and are using tools like this? What about internal marketing teams who are going in and doing this? I'm not saying that they are, but you couldn't blame them for giving it a go. So it depends how you use it, I think.
There's an interesting, it leads us on to an article I wanted to share as well, which is, the title of this article is "Art Made by AI Wins Fine Arts Competition." So it's art that was generated and submitted to a fine arts competition actually won overall. And for those that are watching rather than listening, the image is really stunning. It's a fantastic looking image, and as I was saying before, I've never been able to generate anything nearly as convincing as this. So I do wonder whether that process that you mentioned, where they Frankensteined loads of exports from the AI and then fed that again to get a more refined version of it, I wonder whether that's something that they did as part of this, because it is a really fantastic looking piece of art and very, very convincing, and clearly convincing enough to win this fine arts competition. Caused a bit of controversy in the competition, of course.
I think that's interesting, though, and again, this is a common theme throughout the conversation today, which is, does generative AI mean that I can go and make a masterpiece? No, it doesn't, because I don't know what to ask the generative AI to do, because I don't have the knowledge and the skills and the art history degree or whatever it might be that allows me to provide the sorts of prompts that are going to get you a result like the one that you were just talking about on screen. That, again, it comes down to your ability to provide the right prompts and your willingness to spend time harvesting those images, messing with the images, putting them back in, trying over and over again. It's not the sort of thing that you do quickly. Now, granted, it probably doesn't take you as long as it might do to create that masterpiece from scratch, and it's a different skill set, but it's still not done in 5 or 10 minutes. It takes time to get to those results. So I do wonder if this is the key, really, to generative AI, is having the right experts train the models with the right content, but then having the right operators, if you want to call it that, the people that are producing the prompts that are able to get these platforms to provide them with what they need. And it's a little bit like Google. I can often find things quite quickly on Google because I know the kind of prompts and the kind of questions to ask to get to the thing I want to get to quickly. But there are lots of people who don't use those kind of technologies every day. And I don't want to pick on older generations, but I'm going to say my mom, for example, who won't get to the results as quickly or find the things she's looking for because she doesn't quite know what the right questions are to ask. And I think this is true of these generative AI on another level, which is, these prompts now have to be so well refined, and you have to be prepared to build on them in order to get the output that you want. And that just seems to be coming through as the conversation's gone on. We keep coming back to this need for good quality prompts and, I guess, the right underlying data to get you where you want to be.
Prompting engineer, the next
exactly the job title, is it?
Yeah, something like that.
It probably will be.
Yeah, it will be. That's going to be a big booming career path, I imagine, in the next couple of years. Cool. So that's the image side. I don't have anything else to add. Oh, actually, we do have one more image generator, which I want to talk about, which is, again, something that Jay and I have used. It's an app called Lenser, and I was hesitant to talk about this one because this is also caught up in that kind of copyright issue as well. And it also has some privacy concerns, so I can't, in good conscience, recommend anyone actually use it. I found this out after I used it. But they have some, I mean, you might be cool with it, but their policy is that any images that you generate through their app, they can use for any of their advertising or make money on. So Lensa, for those of you who don't know, you feed it, say, 50 images, selfies of you. It gets a good sense of what you look like and then generates, say, 100. I can't remember how many it is. I think it scales up.
You actually pay for it. I think you have to feed it a minimum of 20 images and you've got 100 back from memory. But the more you fed it, the better theoretically, the better the output.
Yeah. And so they generate different styles of these AI avatars. They basically just look like you, but in different circumstances. You might be in space. You might be, there's lots of space ones actually, and lots of alien style ones. They're clearly leaning on that side of things. But a lot of people complained about how it was heavily influenced by artists. You can tell by the images, but also the privacy concerns as well. So any of our faces that were generated through Lensa can be used for their adverts now, Jay. I'm not sure why they would want to use mine, but there you go.
Or mine. There's some genuinely scary ones it produced of me, to be quite honest.
There is. And this is one of the reasons why we're saying that they can't get eyes and faces right all the time. So a lot of them that they generated, I think the 100 that they generated for me, a good 20 to 30 of them were completely not usable just because of how weird it was.
With your glasses, didn't it, as well? I noticed you said there were certain points where if you looked closely you could see something had gone awry with your eyes and your glasses. So clearly that was a challenge for it. But I thought the Lensa app was I liked it. It was easy to use. Of course, there's the whole policy piece and what's actually happening with the images. Personally, not that bothered. I don't think for a minute they're going to use mine for anything. But they might do, and I guess that would probably be a problem at that time, and maybe I'm a bit naive to it, but I was a bit put off by the fact that I had to pay £5 for the privilege of having my graphics generated, especially now that I've realised I could have probably used one of the other free online alternatives. But I guess for the convenience of having it packaged and the novelty value, £3 or £4, not the end of the world. And I didn't feed it the best quality headshots. I think had I got a selection of 20 really good selfies. I'm not someone who keeps a lot of pictures of myself on my phone, unfortunately. It's just not my thing. So I really struggled, and I had to go back over a number of years to try and find 20 decent selfies. I think if I had a good portfolio of recent pictures made, I'd be quite interested to see what the output was like when the quality in was better. And again, this comes back to the quality of the data you're training on. If I gave it 20 really good, different perspectives, different facial expressions, etc., would those outputs have been much improved or not?
Yeah,
I'm probably never going to get around to trying it, but I would be interested to see what the output was. Maybe go to a professional photography studio, have 20 kind of shots done, and then feed those in and see what happens. Maybe one to try for the future, or we should put that down as a
YouTube video,
as a future test. Yeah, why not?
That and a Twitch stream of you on the dance mat. We've got to do that as well. I think that's the output.
Honestly, I had a quick go earlier on. One, I got out of breath after about 3 minutes, which was embarrassing. And two, I'm not good at it. Really not good at it. And I'm going to blame the dance mat. It's quite small. It's aimed at children. There wasn't enough space for me to jump around. So that's my excuse.
I still want to see it. I think the audience knows, I'm sure.
Maybe if there's enough demand for it, we'll do a stream with me on the dance mat.
Yeah, so anyone who's interested actually to see any of the AI avatars that were generated for Jay and I, we actually do have them up on our About Us page on Twitch. So check that out if you want to see what we look like as kind of spacey cartoon people.
We did pick our favourites as well, though, so they're probably not a good representation of the selection of weirdness that came back. But yeah, there were some genuinely good ones in there.
There was.
Yeah, so go and check those out on Twitch.
So last thing I wanted to talk about today, just because I'm conscious of time, running up against the hour, is, so we've talked about text generation, we've talked about images, we now have music generation, and you've already kind of demoed this earlier with the AI music competition. But there are tools already out there, and so this is a Google one, maybe one of the 20 or 30 that you said that we're going to release this year. But for text inputs, generating kind of songs or music just based on what you've put in here. And it begs the same questions that we've already talked about before, about influencers and copyright and having the right prompts. So I imagine that's why there is an AI song contest, because it's not just, write me a top 10 hit. It has to be pretty detailed about what you want to actually get anything good out of it. So yeah, really interesting. And you've kind of demoed it perfectly in the intro with the demo of that funny song.
And we should state for clarity, the intro that we have for our show is not AI generated, unlike most of our other assets. That was from Robbie's talents and all of his many instruments you can see for those watching on video in his background. But we didn't do that for that, but we could have, I suppose, had we thought about it. We perhaps could have challenged AI to produce an intro for the show. Maybe that's one to try in the future, just to see what it can come up with. What's the competition like, Robbie, for you and your fellow music creators?
It would be in keeping with the show, but actually, we've talked about all these other areas, and music is the one that I'm most interested in. Or I play a lot of music, I record a lot of music, and I would feel the most uncomfortable generating some music for our show rather than writing it and recording it myself. So I guess in that sense, I do feel for the other artists, the image artists and text, poetry and all the other kind of areas that are, feel uncomfortable or think it's controversial with a generation. I do feel it for the music side. I think it's a bit weird. But yeah, maybe we could have. I'm glad we didn't.
I got to be honest, it's one area. So when you propose this topic for today, I have had, as you say, some exposure to the image generating tools. Very recently spent some time kind of just understanding ChatGPT and what that was all about. The music is completely off the radar for me, with the one interesting exception I came across on a TED Talk, and I shared this on LinkedIn a good few months ago. But there was a lady, she was a singer, but also a technologist, and she had trained an AI model on her voice. And this particular model didn't learn words. It was all about pitches and tones. So this AI could do a number of things. One of the things that she demonstrated in the TED Talk was that she was able to, and following the training of the AI, feed a foreign song to the AI, so a entirely different language that she did not speak. And then this AI could sing the song as her. Wow. With her tones, her pitches, and like her sound. And that was one. And then the second thing, which completely blew me away, was the real-time demonstration. So they had this guy came out. It was a black guy, fantastic sort of deep, soulful voice, and he came out to do an original song. And he got two microphones. And the first microphone was just a normal microphone. So as he sang, his voice came through the audio, and it was brilliant. Really, really lovely voice. Then the second microphone was the AI. So as he sang into that microphone, you could just about hear him, because obviously it was recorded live in a room, but through the microphone came her voice singing his song as he was singing. So live translation of his voice into her tones. And then, which was already like, your brain's going, wow, what's happening? Then he sang a duet. So he just brought both microphones up at the same time, sang a part of the song, and she was singing, and he was singing, all from just his voice and this AI trained model. And it was fascinating to watch. I don't know how well it would work with an established artist that I recognised. If we'd had, Michael Jackson back in the day, for being a bad example, but if he'd recorded all of his voice to an AI, for example, or we trained an AI model, could it reproduce a truly accurate and realistic sounding version of him? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know her music. So I wasn't listening to this guy sing and thinking, oh my God, it's just like her. It sounded like her. It sounded like what she told us she sounded like and how she was speaking. But would I have been tricked? I don't know, because I wasn't listening to something that I recognised. So it'd be quite compelling to have a more recognisable artist record their voice and then have that sung by someone else. Yeah. But yeah, that was a really interesting video to watch. And again, I don't know what the AI tech behind it was. It probably wasn't generative AI, but quite an interesting example of AI doing some clever stuff with music. Scary world we live in at the minute, isn't it? It is.
It's all happened so fast as well. It's literally the last couple of months that all these tools have started to come to light. A lot of
really gone mainstream. What interests me is how fast it's squashed talk of the blockchain and the metaverse and Web3. Like those were the talking points. I was at a conference last summer, and all anyone talked about was blockchain, NFT. That was the buzz. They're still relevant, obviously. They're still around. They're still a thing, and there's still lots to be done with them. But this has just completely blown up in the media. And from a sort of tech and future innovation perspective, all anyone is talking about is this work. And I do think for a little while, AI as a sort of big scary thing of the future had gone quite quiet. Maybe it had gone away a little bit. Yeah. This has brought it right back to everyone's attention. It's right back in the front of the media now, and it's all anyone's talking about. So I guess appropriate that we jump on the bandwagon and dedicate episode 2 to exactly that.
Yeah, one to watch, definitely. I wonder if in a year's time it'll be something completely different, just like with blockchain, that's just completely taken over the headlines again. And no doubt we'll be talking about it at the time. But yeah, I think that's it for this episode. So if you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on all good podcast services as well, so you don't miss an episode. And you can also check us out on Twitch at Jay and Robbie, where we stream roughly 3 times a week and play a mix of games. So thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.